At the heart of Willisden High School, a secret lurks in the shadows. Join us as we uncover the mystery of descendants of witches as Olivia's world falls apart, and the lines between reality and nightmare blur. What is real and what is the work of evil? Let's find out. Here is Descendants of Witches EP15. Thank you for your likes and subscriptions. Hope to see your comments in the comment section. 2. 30 William I. You look much finer, my lady, Prince William commented as he smirked at the witch. More womanly. She hesitantly nodded as she stood with a poised grace. Her hands were clasped together, and she wore a weary expression as if she was slightly uncertain about her new attire. William scoffed and traced his hands over the black linen gown that entangled her thin frame. Beautiful, he thought, rubbing the fresh white collar of her dress between his stubby thumbs. The prince had ordered his maids and servants to dress the newcomer, in the spirit of her arrival to the castle. William did not regret it a bit, as the unsmeared witch pleased his icy green eyes. William slid his hands around her narrow waist and pulled her to his embellished chest, sniffing her fragrant hair. Her scent was intoxicating. The prince had never met a witch, man or woman, so he assumed that they all smelled like grit from the cattle farm. However, this witch smelt entirely different. When he had met her the other day, she surprisingly consisted of a scent that represented fresh timber, like the aroma of a damp forest after the rain. Now that she was washed, her hair had an aroma similar to fresh-scented pine and honey. "Do you enjoy this new attire?" he asked as he brushed the wispy strands of hair that dangled above her sunken eyes. Her hair was not a chaotic nest anymore, rather, it was tied back in a slick bun. Her tied-back hair revealed features of her face William had not noticed before. She had a nose that was big and crooked, like the menacing women in that fresco painting, and hollow cheeks that symbolized her malnourishment and lack of wealth. "Indeed, it is quite pleasant," she replied, discreetly squirming under his strong grip. "Thank you for dressing and bathing me, William Stevenson." The prince grinned as his palms traveled to her featureless chest and rested there. He scrutinized her porcelain skin that was ashen and soft, from having just taken a bath. Her recessed cheeks inflated ever so slightly with every breath, and her purplish onyx eyes blazed brightly now that the dirt surrounding it had been washed off. His free hand traced the outline of her lips that were once leathery and chapped, were now pink and soft. Just as his hands were sliding down her back and towards the bosom of her charcoal dress, the witch unstrangled herself from the prince's grip. "Thank you very much, William Stevenson. Where is Wilson Stevenson? Or would you rather we keep this second curse a secret?" she asked as her pointed black boots staggered backwards. William pursed his lips and glanced around the illuminated hallway of the castle, ensuring that not a soul could hear their conversation. "This shall remain a secret between the two of us. If I truly want to take over the throne, my brother cannot know. I shall lie to him and tell him that I was unsuccessful in finding you, which should keep him distracted for a couple of weeks. In the meantime, you shall remain hidden in one of the finest bedrooms of this castle," he explained, diligently crossing his gloved hands behind his back. "What is the next step, William Stevenson?" she asked, blinked at him with eyes that were devoid of expression. Her lips formed a thin line on her face, and William imagined the beauty of her smile that he hoped to see one day. Although he could not ignore the tugging feeling at his heart, telling him that the witch had not smiled for centuries, and would not for 8 centuries more. "That is the exact question I have for you, my lady," he remarked eloquently. His jade eyes shone at her with glints of eagerness. "Now that I have gifted you with my riches, tell me about this curse, and what I have to fulfill to receive an heir." "I hope it will not take long, my lady." The witch nodded firmly, her coarse fingers intertwined. "I suggest we go somewhere discreet, for it would be treason if someone heard us," she solemnly stated. William gestured for the witch to follow him. "Indeed, if it pleases my lady. Let us discuss in the solitude of the church library," William said, taking the lead. There was a moment of quiet between the two as they exited the castle and walked towards the church. William craned his neck and glimpsed at the witch, curious about her. There was no doubt about it, she was strange. From the way she walked with a slight limp to the thick accent in her voice, it was evident that she had foreign roots. She held herself gracefully and confidently, although there was a slight tinge of absent-mindedness within her eyes. Nonetheless, William wondered about her age, what her childhood was like, and most importantly, her name. Doubts continued to flood his mind about the authenticity of this woman, who claimed to be a pagan witch. He would have to see her cast a spell to believe her. It would not be far-fetched to say that perhaps the chants she spoke to curse his family were simply words with no meaning, and that this was all a ploy. What would be her motive anyway? Could the reason she cursed the Stevenson family simply be because the king taunted her? Tell me, my lady, what type of magic do you use? Black or white magic? He suddenly asked as they trotted through the grassy fields. The witch looked up at William, her violet eyes glimmering beneath the moonlight. I am a pagan witch. I am neither good nor evil because nature is neither black nor white, she said with an air of poeticness. William raised his blonde eyebrows with disbelief. The aura he sensed from her was dark, one that a black magic user would have. Impossible, my lady. How can you curse my family with ill intent, yet say that you are neither one nor the other? He questioned as they approached the church doors. The church has specifically stated that white magic has been used by healers, for the good of mankind. Black magic users are those who cast wicked spells that harm mankind, he added, pushing the heavy iron doors. The church lies, she brazenly stated, stepping into the darkly lit room and blending in with the shadows. They know nothing of witchcraft and the rituals my pagan ancestors have practiced for centuries. They blatantly spew out a meaning for what they cannot understand, she added, as her violet eyes skittishly darted the library. The word witch has only been mentioned in the Bible 13 times. That speaks for the matter itself. William gaped at her, his eyes wide and his lips twitching into a small grin. So there are more who think that, he thought as he lit a couple of candles. One by one, as each candle lit up, so did a section of the library. The entire castle was made purely with gold, which was something the Stevenson brothers prided themselves in. However, the church and library were different, as it was a remnant of a time long gone by. King Wilson never got around to ordering his servants to encrust it with gold, so it stayed the same for a plethora of years that even William's father had not lived through. The prince scanned the room alongside the witch, having been here only 3 times before. Dust collected everywhere as far as he could see and spider webs wove loosely around books, dirted shelves and stands. Overhead, green vines hung from the cracked ceiling that was embedded with tiny fluttering insects. The crevices in the wall allowed small slivers of moonlight to spill inside, but it was still not enough to illuminate the shadowed room. The faint chirps of nocturnal animals outside were all that could be heard, as they were the only ones inside during this time of twilight. My lady, let us take some ease and sit at that table, he said, pulling out a wooden chair for her to sit upon. Once they were both seated beside each other, William crossed his legs and drummed his fingers against the wooden table, waiting for the witch to explain his duty. For moments, silence hung in the air as the witch continued gazing around the room. It was as if she wanted to prolong the suspense that erupted through William. Minutes later, she finally twisted to meet William's piercing gaze. Her expression was unreadable, and William's dancing thoughts were intertwining and strangling each other with confusion as to what she was thinking. The curse I am planning to cast unto you is a lifelong one, but it shall not end when you die. It will live on through your son, and his son thereafter. She finally started, staring at William with stern eyes. This curse is a shackle that your family shall bear, with no key to free yourselves. William nodded and suppressed a yawn. She speaks like my queen mother, he thought as he bit his tongue. Understood, my lady. How are we going to go about this? He probed, leaning forward to demonstrate his eagerness for this conversation. What exactly is the part of this blessing I shall uphold? The church, she ominously stated, folding her hands neatly. Target the church with my pagan powers. William knitted his eyebrows and scratched his chin. Do explain this to me in detail. In my boyhood, I have never truly paid any attention during my schooling, so I may be less intelligent than others. Academically, of course, he quipped, hoping to lighten the dark atmosphere, to no avail. I overheard Wilson Stevenson and Cardinal Witchett's conversation yesterday. They were speaking about their plan to initiate an inquisition against my pagan brothers and sisters. They are planning to purge us, simply because we continue to hold on to our elders' traditions, she explained, suppressing her heated emotions. If you do me this favor of taunting the Church of Willisden, I shall grant you a son in 200 years, the witch said, her purple eyes glistening with wisdom and power. Your son thereafter shall perform the same duty, until there is an end to this world. William's mouth hung open and his back jolted up with surprise. 200 years. I cannot wait that long to overthrow my brother. He and I will be 6 feet under by that time. He shouted as he slammed his balled fist against the wooden table. The witch shook her head, unfazed about what she was asking of William. Well, in actuality, 100 years from now until the time you receive a son. Henceforth with your son it shall be 200 years. Consider yourself lucky, William Stevenson, the witch said, ignoring William's bewildered expression. Today I shall teach you about my pagan powers. Tomorrow I shall split my soul, spill my blood, and give you a portion of my abilities through the pact. Once I give you these powers, 6 people of the church will be marked. It will happen on its own. When he tells you who is marked, torment them with my powers. Torment them to an end where they shall never see the light of day, and be so disabled that they cannot act on the Inquisition, she said, quickening her taut tone into one that was fueled with hatred. William blinked rapidly, attempting to keep up with her explanation. Many questions circled his mind, and he was starting to wonder that possibly the witch truly was a witch. Either that or she was a complete lunatic. Excuse me for a second, my lady. I have many questions. What do you mean by marked and torment the church? I cannot torment the church, for the church is the church. Can you not do this yourself since it is your vendetta? He inquired, rubbing his clammy hands against his leather pants. I could very well do this on my own. In fact, I have in the past. However, I am requesting you do this for me if you truly want an heir, she replied, her eyes glowering in an attempt to intimidate the prince, which worked. That is what a compromise is, William Stevenson. Both parties are required to uphold their end of the bargain. I take it that you truly did not pay attention to your schooling during boyhood. William swallowed the lump in his throat and hesitantly nodded. I feel unsure about acquiring powers from a witch, he said, pressing his back against the chair. At first he wanted to know everything about the witch, yet now he wanted to stay as distant as possible. Some truths are better left unsaid, he anxiously told himself. Do not worry, for you shall only have to do this activity twice in your lifetime, the witch said, ominously. Starting from tomorrow, you shall torment the 6 marked people of the church, for the rest of this year. You must end their lives for the curse to truly work. Then in 100 years you shall do it again on the very same date with a new set of marked people. Once that year is completed and you successfully killed them, I shall come to you again, except this time with a son. Why must I wait 100 years? William asked, as his heart thumped with uneasiness. Can I simply perform this tormenting and finish the job immediately? This is what the devil requests, William Stevenson. One cannot go against the devil, she said, darkly. Besides, I cannot bear a child whenever I like. I too am cursed by him, for I am a pagan witch. I can only reproduce every 200 years. Explain to me how I will live for hundreds of years, he asked, ignoring her statement about bearing his child. Something else had caught his attention. William could have sworn dust had begun unnaturally circling the woman, but when he rubbed his eyes it disappeared. The devil's pact. The devil's mark. Understand, William Stevenson. William could barely see the features on her malicious face amongst the candlelight, but the heavy weight of her words clashed onto William despite this. Her words were the only part of her that he could define at that moment, and it was like a violent tide smashing an innocent shore. It left marks and scars, shredding his soul into fragile pieces. William swallowed his horrified emotions, only for it to build up in his parched throat. How stupid I am to bring a witch to my castle. I blame the cardinal for all this. And my foolish king brother. He scowled to himself. As much as he was intrigued to learn more, he couldn't bring himself to question her further about the details of this devil's pact. Instead, he straightened his back that had recoiled with fear, forced a kingly expression on his face, and nodded solemnly. Indeed, my lady. I now understand my task, he said in a quieter voice than he had intended. You said something about showing me your pagan powers and how to use them, he pointed out after clearing his throat. The witch nodded, although to William, All he could hear was the rustling of her cotton gown. "Can you see me well, William Stevenson?" she asked, lifting her right arm that was coated with the darkness of the shadows. "Unfortunately, no, my lady. The candlelights here are dim," he admitted while squinting and rubbing his sore eyes. Before William could bat his eyelash, the witch snapped her fingers. Pulsing from her skeletal fingers was a strange blazing flame. William watched with wide and alert eyes as the flame flickered amongst the dark shadows of the library. The colors changed from amber to ruby, and then back to gold in a repetitive pattern. It lit up the room that had been partially visible and blinded his eyes, like a fiery hearth. "Oh my!" William exclaimed as he recoiled and shielded his sensitive orbs, taken aback by her sudden movements. It took him lengthy seconds for the new information to sink in, even though it was right before his eyes, larger than life. After a gasp of realization, his lips stretched into a gaping grin and his eyebrows arched towards the ceiling. "It is true. She is a pagan witch." As the witch lit up the room with a simple snap from her right hand, William lowered his arms and stared at her in awe. He wondered how one so lanky and stunted could achieve this level of power. Intense flames of fire burst from her fingertips as the ash fell to the varnished ground elegantly. From her soul, she poured forth an outburst of emotions that fueled her magic. Their surroundings were dismal, her movements were somber, and her purple eyes were glowing with power. Pure power. Power that Prince William Stevenson deeply desired. "This is truly bewitching, my lady," he breathlessly whispered, unable to think of anything else to say. "This shall be all mine, will it not?" he confirmed, leaning towards the sparkling flame. The flames danced and leapt in the air, reaching hungrily for anything they can consume to fuel their wrath. The amber fire reflected against William's glassy green eyes, contrasting and conforming at the same time. The witch smirked, appreciating the praise. "No, it shall not all be yours. Only half, William Stevenson. Only for 2 years of your extremely lengthy life," she hissed, as the fire crackled and simmered. William was so entranced with the mystical power that emitted from the woman, that her words barely entered his ears. His face was incredibly close to the fire, in awe of the threatening hearth. He began to wonder what he would do with this incredible ability. Perhaps he would burn Cardinal Witchett with the fire, and he supposed killing off his brother at the same time would be an additional benefit. Then he wouldn't have to wait years for Wilson to die in order to be crowned king. He blinked and suddenly the witch slashed the air with her fiery fist, which caused him to instantly recoil. The bulbs of fire now had a mind of their own as they flew up to the ceiling, hovering and illuminating the library. "How did you do that?" William asked, blinking up with astonishment as his brain attempted to fathom the otherworldliness of this experience. The witch brushed her palms against each other, wiping off the ashes that remained from the glowing hearths that now hovered above them. "That was what the devil willed when I asked him to allow me to show you my pagan powers," she said, although to William it sounded like she was speaking a different language. "Would you like to see how I control it?" William eagerly nodded, as every fiber of his being vibrated with eager anticipation. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he awaited her next spell. He felt like a cat giddily waiting to pounce on a mouse, hungry for more. "Show me, my lady," he said, licking his salivating lips as his legs bounced impatiently. The witch grinned and raised her right arm again, turning it over and splaying her fingers so William could observe her palm. "The devil's mark," she said, pointing at the triangular-shaped mark that was carved on her palm. "It allows me to communicate with the devil and ask him for his magic. I use my right hand to create what he desires since that is the hand the mark is imprinted on." He leaned forward and peered closely at the devil's mark that was etched on her palm. 3 crimson lines were connected to form a triangle. A thick line crossed through the middle. Dried blood that looked like it had built up for years alongside grime, and flayed skin surrounded the deep cuts. The scars stretched past the palm of her hand, and red lines spiraled around the triangle, extending towards the tips of her bony fingers. Foreign characters were scrawled in bloody handwriting underneath the mark, faded from centuries of weathered current. "You shall receive this mark tomorrow when we make the pact," she said, balling her fists so Prince William could not analyze her peculiar mark any further. "When you receive it, you will know how to control it. Nature's ways are unexplainable, William Stevenson." He leveled his gaze and peered straight into her eyes, swallowing shaky breaths. His lips parted as a whirlwind of emotions swirled through him. However, no questions swirled his mind. He simply knew that she was speaking with truthfulness, and there is nothing he could do to change the things that have been set in stone. "Show me more. I want to see more," he softly demanded. He was like a child, reaching up for the window ledge on his tiptoes, eager to see the first blossoms of spring or the winter snowflakes drizzling from the sky. The world bustling behind him would stop for a moment when he saw what he desired, his eyes wide with lust and his grin wider. The witch obliged as she lifted her right hand, and without a moment's hesitation, she flicked her wrist. William could sense a hint of deeper magic radiating off of the woman who sat beside him. This magic wasn't only denser than the previous one, it was ripe as if it were coming from decayed flesh that mingled with the earth. It was terrifying, intentional black magic. Spewing out from her fingertips like a striking arrow was a humanoid shadow. The dark apparition was no more than a distortion of the fiery light, a darkened human that was not natural. Yet the apparition moved naturally, its brisk hair fluttering with every movement, and its elongated limbs flailing in the air. "Stop this! Stop this, you witch!" he blindly shouted, as he jumped up from his seat and stumbled backwards. His eyes were glued onto the shadow that took silent steps towards him. As the atmosphere grew menacing, the shadow began levitating 1 foot off the ancient rotting floorboards and passed through the wooden table like a poltergeist. The shadow raised its dark arms and its featureless face stared intently at William as their frigid noses touched. "Do you understand now, William Stevenson?" the witch asked, her right arm still raised in a taunting manner. "My pagan powers are not beautiful or breathtaking. It is a force you shall not reckon with, a force that you shall be careful with when gifted to you on your auspicious dates. Simply perform your task by creating these phantoms to torment your marked people, and then you shall be gifted with a son." William gritted his teeth as the shadow curled its icy hands around his cheeks, pinching and pulling in an undesirable manner. The inky darkness engulfed the frail light, diminishing all happiness and bliss that had risen previously with the fiery magic. His breathing turned ragged as terse tears dripped down his cheeks. "Yes, I understand, witch. Get rid of this banshee now," he desperately bellowed, struggling to break free from the shadow's strong grip. The witch grinned and snapped her fingers, and the shadow disintegrated on the spot immediately. Droplets of black ink splattered from where the shadow once stood, raining down on William. Then it all disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, without leaving any trace behind. William sighed with relief as he relaxed his tense muscles and wiped the beads of sweat that dripped down his forehead. He sucked the thick air and turned to face the witch, who sat nonchalantly on her seat, her hands folded neatly and her legs crossed over the other. He stared into her gaunt violet eyes as he slowly returned to his seat. "Do you understand now, William Stevenson?" she repeated, her lips curving into a playful grin. "Do not ever attempt to change the devil's rules, or ask for more. I am only giving you half my powers, so your abilities will be limited only to the people who are marked. The shadows and phantoms will manifest themselves into whatever torments the marked person best. All you have to do is request and control it. Perform your duty and simply continue with your life." William bit his lip and grudgingly nodded. "Promise. Since I shall outlive my brother, I will be crowned king next. I will outlive everyone, and no one will suspect a thing, for I will lie to every generation. I will perform my duty this year and in 100 years, and then you shall give me my son, who shall be my heir until the day I die," he stated, relaying the information so the witch knows that he understands. As much as he desperately wanted all of the pagan witch's powers, he decided to resist the greedy urges. Being king was more important to William, so all he had to do is wait. "At least I get to play around with this witchcraft for 2 years, he smirked to himself. "Good," she slyly nodded, outstretching her slender hands and clasping them around his face. "I suppose I have a soft spot for you, William Stevenson, even though you think of me as a malicious witch," she whispered, as her touch sent chills down his spine. "Perhaps the devil will permit me to tell you who your marked peoples will be." William's eyebrows arched and he bobbed his head up and down earnestly. "That would be incredibly kind of the devil," he coyly remarked, as the witch pulled him close to her lips. William's face flushed pink at the closeness of the woman, and he closed his eyes, preparing himself for a peck. Much to his dismay, the witch diverted her route and brought her lips to his ears. Grand Duke Aimeriget Tuyen Sir Patur Iohans II, your queen mother, your queen sister-in-law, Cardinal Witchet IV, and King Wilson Stevenson I, she whispered, her chilling breath piercing his bare skin. Remember, you must kill them in order for your mission to be successful. A grin found its way on Prince William's face, and it surprised even himself. I suppose I do not have to wait long to be king, he chuckled, as his emerald eyes darkened with mischievous glee. This pact is too good to be true. 2. 31 The witch ravens or crows. Only the pagan witch knows. That's what the deities sing about her. The witch always believed that it was ravens. Her mother believed that it was crows. Her dead mother wasn't a pagan witch, so she wouldn't know. The witch hummed this melody as she skipped down the golden hallways. She enjoyed her new home. It was extravagant and the rooms had regulated temperatures, unlike the chilly woods. The food was weird. Not disgusting but different. Good different. Her lips curved up into a tiny smile at the thought of living here forever. She ran her fingers through her sleek black hair that was tied in a tight bun, finding her hair pleasant for once. Her new black dress that was wrapped around her body perfectly, swished with every bounce of her feet. William Stevenson had gifted it to her, so she shall keep this one until the end of her time. Ravens or crows. Only the pagan witch knows. To the library she goes. She has seen this library many times before. Her first sighting of it a couple of centuries prior. She saw it stand alone on top of the hill, torn in half with vines spiraling out of the cracked bricks. Leather-bound books laid on the ancient floorboards, its open pages fluttering in the breeze of every season. She yearned to reach out and pick one up, but she was too deep in the forest. After 100 or so years, she watched the ivory church being built around it, its shining stones glimmering against the sun's rays and concealing the mystical library. She had seen many commotions like these from her coven, deep in the woods. Although was it truly a coven, if she was eerily alone? As she neared the heavy wooden doors of the gray library, her footfalls echoed and bounced off the luminous walls. She had never been inside this library or the castle before being gifted it, despite staring at it for centuries. It excited her, thrilled her even, to be trotting around the church corridors freely. It was the same feeling as before when she had the sudden impulse to enter the church of Willisden. It was a church she had been gazing at for centuries, wondering what commotion went on inside. Although it was not simply an impulse. It was the devil's request. Ravens or crows. Only the pagan witch knows. The memories of that day in the church reminded her of the Christians. The witch disliked the devil, but neither did she like their God. She respected their wishes, listened to their discussions, but never felt the same way. It made sense, for she is pagan. Nature and her deities are the divine phenomena she prays to. But what do they say about her being a witch? They say nothing, for she meets no one. Although back then, when she was young, curious, and desperate for adventure, she sought someone. Anyone. After a while she met someone. She talked, sung, and danced with him. But then he left. He left when she cursed him because she foresaw him leaving. She realized now it was a stupid mistake, but he would have left anyway when he found out she was a witch. She would realize decades later that it was a befuddling paradox. She dislikes the devil, yet she is a witch. How did that come to be? It was difficult for even her to pinpoint, for all she knows is the devil. And her name. She barely recalled contacting the devil on that starry night. Compromising, collaborating, conjuring, cursing. She didn't know why or how it happened, it just happened. The next day she woke up, wrapped in the devil's duvet with his mark carved on her right palm. She dislikes the devil, yet she answers his every request. There is no swaying the devil. He only sways thee. Ravens or crows. Only the pagan witch knows. The witch pushed open the wooden doors of the library, the burst of wind rushing through her dress and shooting up her blue veins. She tilted her head upwards, puffed her chest outwards, and straightened her back. A grin spread across her leathery face as she marched forward, unable to hold back her anticipation. Today is the day. The day everything will change for the royal Stevenson family. Today is the day the devil's pact will be sealed. It was going to be quite a historical moment, the witch foresaw. On the surface, it seemed that William Stevenson was the one gaining more from this curse than she was. That was not true. Not true at all. She may not be as cunning or intelligent as the men who rule this castle, but she has no fear and eons of magic sparking at her fingertips. That was all that mattered. She doesn't fear the church, the Inquisition, or the devil. They fear her, for she is foreign, different, pagan. Soon they shall learn that there is nothing to fear but fear itself. Her blood shall cover their sins but never hide the truth. She shall gain what she shall gain because her deep violet eyes have seen her gaining what she shall gain. William Stevenson, she announced, folding her hands neatly over her dress. She smiled wickedly at William Stevenson, who confidently stepped from the shadows. The candlelight flickered amongst the bookshelves, its shadows stretching into the moonlight. "My lady," he nodded, stripping the navy blue cape that hung from his embellished shoulders. William Stevenson approached her, with an equally wicked smile plastered on his chivalrous face. He ran his coarse hands through his light brown hair, that sometimes appeared blonde in the candlelight. She inhaled the scorched air sharply, as she translated her next words in her head before speaking it out loud. "Today is the day of the Devil's Pact," she finally said, the violet chips in her eyes glimmering against the amber light. "September 3rd, 1246. It is a day that will be remembered for the rest of eternity." The tail-end curves of William Stevenson's lips reached to the depths of his emerald eyes, reminding the witch of the vines and moss that comforted her for many millennia. "I am extremely excited, my lady," he said, his voice deep and husky. It was not like that the day they first met. The witch recalled his voice being young and carefree, with a quippy attitude. That all changed yesterday when she showed him her pagan powers. Now his voice was deep with greed and lustful for power. Power the witch did not intend to give him for long. "I have one question for you, William Stevenson. Are you prepared to kill your family after we seal this deal?" she inquired, staring deep into his jade eyes and demonstrating her unyielding expression. William Stevenson huffed and scoffed as if it did not pain him one bit. "I am thoroughly prepared, my lady. Thrilled even to kill off my king brother this year. Then I shall rule Willisden for 100 years, while I wait for my heir to be born. It shall be a fruitful and endearing life." He chuckled and placed a hand on her slender shoulder. "Thank the devil for me, my lady." "The devil shall never be thanked," she sternly stated, swatting his hand off her shoulder. William Stevenson shot her a baffled look but dismissed her statement. It was something he did often, the witch noted. Dismissal. That was a very bad thing for him to do. Very bad indeed. "Did you bring the supplies I asked you to bring, William Stevenson?" she asked, marching towards the wooden desk they sat upon yesterday. William Stevenson trailed behind her, while he pulled out a black book and a crimson rose from his beige satchel. "Indeed, my lady," he said, placing the materials on the table. "The book has empty pages like you asked. And the rose is a blood-red color with the sharpest thorns." The book opened as sweetly as spring flowers, and the witch was shocked by the freshness of the charcoal cover. Upon those soft leaves were blank words for the soul, and the absence of poetry she purposely erased. She scanned every page for an inky word, yet none came, much to her relief. The witch flipped to the last page, her skeletal fingers tracing the thinner-than-air paper. Beside her, William Stevenson stiffened, and it seemed he finally caught on. "And my lady," his trembling voice whispered, noticing the familiar way she handled the book. It was dark, so she could not see the expression on his shadowed face, but she truly did not care. "Yes, it was me," she simply answered, leaving the vague matter at rest. "I am a pagan witch after all. I foresee many things." She lifted her gaze from the book that would be alive for centuries to come and picked up the crimson rose. She brought it under her glowing violet eyes and pricked her thumb on every thorn. The green thorns were as large as a falcon's talon, just like she needed. Blood dripped from her pierced thumb, the same color as the delicate petals that were softer than life. "Good, William Stevenson," she said, shooting him a satisfied grin. "How are we going to go about this ritual, my lady?" he inquired, after regaining his composure. It seemed William Stevenson was beginning to grow wary of the witch, but it was too late to back out now. "I am a pagan witch. There is no explaining, only doing," she ominously said, turning to face the desk. The witch rested the velvet rose on top of the open book, placing it in the middle of the very last page. She crushed the rose petals with the sharp fingernail on her index finger, smashing it into ash-like pieces. The aroma of the withering flower flooded the room, and she had not even activated her powers yet. The ritual begins now. Stand still, William Stevenson. Do not move an inch and do not inhale a breath, she ordered, refusing to avert her gaze from the book. William Stevenson gulped and did not respond. He followed her orders obediently, as his green eyes carefully watched the witch perform her craft. Good. Stand silently still, and the devil shall agree to curse thee. This was a different curse calling for different methods. Where had she learned these methods? Even she did not know. It came to her naturally, after becoming a witch. Perhaps it was because the devil occasionally whispered the instructions in her ears, his chilly breath controlling her mind and movements. But not today. Today she knew what to do, without the devil's help. Ati voco diaboli, she chanted as her index finger rested on top of the smashed petals. Strenuus me vires adversus paganos, she called in Latin. Her head tilted up to the dark ceiling as her finger twisted against the mushed petals. She picked apart the intact thorns and began shredding the chunks of petals remaining, scarring the paper beneath. The witch did not have to turn around to see the confusion that emitted from William Stevenson, who could not see a thing, only hear. Soon he shall understand, the witch foresaw. The devil answered her beckoning call and arrived in the form of a misty shadow of blackness. He blew out the flickering candles, burning out any source of light during this midnight hour. It hovered and concealed itself within the shadowed library, having fooled even William Stevenson. But not the witch. The devil never fools the witch, as the witch never fools the devil. Vivamus me carissime, the devil replied, chilling the air with its presence. Debo tibi vires adversus paganos. The witch grinned, her thumb still deep in the pool of decayed rose petals. During this moment of silence, a breeze slapped her right palm, and the devil had given her permission to activate her pagan powers. The witch turned over her hand to scrutinize her palm. Despite the pitch darkness of the library, she could see the fresh blood seeping from her devil's mark through her glowing violet eyes. She grinned and nodded towards the devil with satisfaction. Tibi gratias ago tibi diaboli, she gratefully thanked. The devil did not respond. Instead, he hovered across the table, watching with keen eyes as the witch performed the next part of the ritual. The curse. She turned to face William Stevenson, whose face was as pale as it was the other day when she had shown him the poltergeist she created. She grabbed the open book from the table, its pages sprinkled with blood-red petals, and solemnly stood in front of William Stevenson. They stared deeply into each other's eyes, and the eeriness of the quiet library suddenly startled William Stevenson. The witch could sense. Volatant, she ordered the book. It levitated from her grasp, right in front of William Stevenson's eyes. As the black book hovered in the air, its flaps wide open for all to see, the witch's right palm glowed a dark purple hue. She was too focused on the spell to consider William Stevenson's appalled expression. With a wave of her right palm, the book fluttered to the side and began to watch the two sinister people with observant eyes. The page with the smushed petals was still wide open, and the witch felt a surge of elatedness rush through her veins at the sight. It is happening. It is happening right now. The witch eagerly flicked her wrist in the direction where the book was hovering. She outstretched her arm and gripped the air as if she was hauling an invisible rope out of the book's splayed pages. As she pulled and pulled, William Stevenson's eyes widened and widened. Seconds later, the crushed petals danced amongst the pages of the blank book. They circled the center of it like a black hole, sucking everything to its core. Then, with one last tug, a black rose sprouted from the black book. Everything about it was utterly black. From the stem thorns to the tip of the bud, it was black. It was healthy and fresh, yet it was black. The witch grinned when the manufactured rose fell from the book's pages and landed on her carved palm. She curled her fingers around the prickled stem and slowly placed it inside the pocket of William Stevenson's tunic. It shall never die, that black rose. She raised both of her hands, her palms facing William Stevenson, and uttered the chants that would change the course of all their destinies. Singulus anisiti viribus sibi donari, she chanted, the purple sparks intensifying with each word. Cum descentisita habibus filium, she continued, a grin slowly spreading across her face. Ipsi marieter postmodem. The witch retrieved the black rose from his pocket and overturned William Stevenson's right palm. She lowered the stem of the rose and pricked his palm. As blood dripped onto the floor, William Stevenson tried his best not to flinch. She carved coarse lines in his flesh, allowing her hands to fly freely like a bird as she swished the rose gracefully. Her mind was directing her hand, moving instinctively to the right spot and building a picture she had seen many times before. She peered down at the first devil's mark she created. 3 lines connected each other to form a triangle. A bloody line shot through the middle. She met his gaze, her fingers still curved around the bloody rose as if it were a quill pen and the man's extracted blood was the ink. "William Stevenson," she hissed, unable to contain her excitement. "Do you vow to abide by the curse for the remainder of your timely life?" William Stevenson gulped and shivered as her chilly words seeped to his bones. I vow to abide by the curse for the remainder of my timely life." Suddenly the world went quiet. The golden castle hushed and it became clear that everyone was asleep. The night owls ceased to chirp and it was eerily unnatural, like dawn devoid of birdsong. The silence clung to them like poisonous clouds that at any moment could snatch the life from them. Something death would do. The witch closed her eyes and tightened her grip around his trembling wrist and the black rose. The black book continued to hover in the air beside them, sneering down at the immortal beings. "Tempus est diaboli," she called to the devil. The devil smirked and slapped the still air, causing waves of harsh wind to erupt through the library. The candles died out instantly, and the entire world was coated with absolute darkness. The wind that was created by the devil blew through the library with a powerful passion, scattering the shelved books as if they were autumn leaves. As the wind howled and ruptured their senses, the witch shielded her face with her arms. She took a moment to peek through an opening wide enough to see William Stevenson's new eyes. Cursed green glowing eyes. The pages of the black book fluttered but remained stubborn by holding on to its last page. Shapes, lines and numbers began writing itself on the last page of the book, placed in the manner of the devil's mark. It was written using the blood extracted from William Stevenson's hand by the black rose. The bloody triangular symbol glowed, illuminating the darkened room. Slowly, scrawled numbers appeared underneath the bloody ink, written by the devil himself. 9-3-12-46, it read. Swiftly, the witch grabbed William Stevenson's right palm and intertwined her hands with his, sealing the pact for the first time. 100 years had passed since the day of the devil's pact. William Stevenson successfully killed the 6 marked people of the church, including Wilson Stevenson I and Cardinal Witchet IV. The witch had observed from the sidelines, and watched as William Stevenson rose to power for hundreds of years. There was no pain in his eyes when he quickly killed his dearest brother, only malevolent hunger. She watched as he lied to the new cardinals and claimed that he was younger than he truly was every decade. She watched as he proclaimed himself as the new king every other decade. She watched as he slowly grew distant from the peasantry activities he once enjoyed, specifically after he butchered a farm of cows for no reason other than to please the people. She watched as he told the common people about having an heir along the way. Conveniently at the time every pope would die. Fortunately for the immortal king, 'twas the Dark Ages so no records were ever kept. He even successfully killed his new set of marked people just yesterday. Yet none of this satisfied the witch. Why did his upholding of the curse fail to satisfy the witch? Only the witch knew, for she is a witch. The only witch. She is the only breathing witch amongst the entire county of Willisden. She is the only breathing witch amongst the entire country. She is the only breathing witch amongst the entire world. Yet the Christians continued to kill her pagan sisters, accusing them of witchcraft, when in fact she is the only witch to have ever existed in the entirety of human history. William Stevenson succeeded in killing the cardinal and the former king, but that did not stop the Inquisition. It dismayed her deeply. So deep that she angrily stomped through the castle corridors, preparing to confront King William Stevenson I. 100 years had passed since the day of the devil's pact. Now it was time to uphold her end of the curse. She planned to do so. She planned to uphold every bit of her curse, even the bits she purposely omitted from William Stevenson. She had foreseen that this would happen 100 years ago, so she prepared for it. She prepared to give William Stevenson what he deserved. Not a son, not an heir, but a lecture with death himself. It was partly due to her hatred for William Stevenson. although her hatred was partly because her plan did not stop the Inquisition. Therefore, she partly hated William Stevenson for failing to uphold his end of the curse, even though he didn't fail one bit. It was a befuddling paradox she would come to realize a couple of centuries later. When she exited the castle and arrived at the church of Willisden, her lips curved into a playful smirk. She felt a growing detestment towards William Stevenson, but at the same time she was eager to watch him suffer. She was a witch after all. A pagan witch. She was neither good nor evil because nature is neither black nor white. She shall commit as many sins as she needed to get what she wanted. Justice. Cradled in her arms was a squalling baby. She covered the baby beneath a black shawl, after lulling him to sleep. She wondered what the immortal king of Willisden planned to name the baby. Their baby. Her lips twitched into a soft smile, as she thought about the baby boy's name being William. How fitting for the soon-to-be king. The witch swiftly shook her head and straightened the black gown that she planned to keep until the end of her time. Now was not the time for the softness of motherhood. Now was the time for anger and sinister tricks. She pushed open the heavy iron-bound doors of the chapel and began solemnly marching through the sacred corridors. When she approached the altar of the nave, King William Stevenson stood in the middle, observing the fresco paintings he added during his reign. Sunshine shone through the colorful stained glass windows, casting an illuminating glow onto the sacred altar and the crown on his head. Her footsteps sounded graceful against the ceramic tiles, as she trotted towards William Stevenson. The lost voices of singing children filled the room the moment she stepped in. Their voices were like angels, high and graceful notes soaring over the clouds, singing for God only. But to the witch's ears they were for the devil. It was his request, after all, to play singing children on days that were not Sunday. William Stevenson. It has been many years since I last saw you, she announced, hiding the covered baby behind her back. William Stevenson broke his skyward gaze and turned around to scrutinize the newcomer. He flashed her a pearl-white smile, one that reminded her of the childlike innocence he used to possess. It has been many years indeed, my lady, William Stevenson said, puffing his chest to show off the royal red mantle that hung from his shoulders. For I am a king now, thanks to you. Indeed, the witch said, nodding as her lips curved into a crackled smile. You look not a day older than 20, William Stevenson. It was true. He did not age at all after the curse had been cast, just as it did with her when she was first cursed. His brown hair continued to occasionally appear blonde amongst the sunlight, and the only difference was that he had a shining gold crown upon his unworthy head. The royal crown was entangled with the roots of his hair like it was a part of his being. His chiseled face that looked down on her was as youthful as ever, and his emerald eyes continued to glimmer with the never-ending desire for adventure, along with a few flickers of lust. He truly did not look 120 years old. As do you, my lady, William Stevenson replied, chuckling. He gently twisted the gold cord that hung from his surcoat, as if it was a plaything. The witch noticed that it eased his anxiousness that had been ever so present since the day he was crowned king. Perhaps all the kingly duties wore him out, in addition to the fact that Sir Petur Iohans too was not alive to assist with his tasks. The witch peered intently at William Stevenson, hoping for a sign of regret or guilt after killing his beloved family many years ago. She saw nothing. It was either he felt nothing towards his treasonous acts, or he masked the remorse so perfectly that even a witch could not tell. Perhaps that was not what a witch was cut out for anyways. You barely visit the castle anymore, William Stevenson, the witch remarked, wearing a feigned expression of sadness. She discreetly glided her thumbs across the baby's stomach, soothing him from behind her back. Soon the heir can see his king father. Soon the heir can be taken away from his king father. You are correct. I have been very busy with my outings to nearby kingdoms. The cardinals over there are quite a pain in the arse, if I do say so myself, William Stevenson explained, swinging the gold cord aimlessly. Although do not fret. I have managed to find time to kill off my marked people this year, as I'm sure you have seen. Truthfully, before we made the devil's pact, I felt no warmth from the world, until I watched it burn by my hands. The witch quietly cackled and nodded. Indeed, I have seen how joyous you are with my pagan powers. In fact, I came here today to discuss that, she said, looking up at William Stevenson with a pointed expression. William Stevenson returned that mischievous look, knowing exactly what she meant, although he decided to act oblivious about it. "Oh my. Discuss what?" he asked dryly. The witch was glad William Stevenson did not take theater as a profession, for he would receive many tomatoes to the face with that unamusing acting. "It has been exactly 100 years since your first excursion, William Stevenson," she said, unable to suppress her grin that grew of its own accord. "It is time for your reward." William Stevenson's features lit up, and it was genuine this time. His back straightened and he even jumped a little like a deliriously happy child. "I have been waiting for this day for so very long," he exclaimed, letting go of his grip on the golden cord. "I cannot wait to see my son, my lady." The witch bit the edge of her lips, a vain attempt to keep her creeping smile at bay. The intention behind her perking lips was something that would be better left unsaid. She twisted her body and revealed the newborn baby that was hidden behind her back. The witch ripped off the black shawl and the baby began wailing as if on cue. His bright green eyes brimmed with tears as he scanned the strange new world after life in the womb. The witch watched as he blinked with his brand new eyes. Cursed green glowing eyes. He took after his father, as one would expect from a child that was never supposed to be birthed. His cherubic face glowed from a light within as the witch handed the giddy father his son. The moment the heir was in the rightful arms, he stopped crying. A laugh escaped his miniature lips, creating a sweet sound that was unblemished by the turmoils of life. "What are you planning to name him?" she asked, surprised by the pang of sadness that washed over her. She knew that she was never supposed to be a mother, as she was a pagan witch. She even foresaw this happening, but one cannot foresee the feelings. However, seeing the baby in his arms made her wonder how different life would have been if she was not a witch, and they were a happy family. Was she doing the right thing by cruelly snatching a son from his father's loving arms? Why William Stevenson too, of course. "He is my heir after all, and he needs a kingly name," William Stevenson exclaimed, tears brimming his eyes as he held the newborn to his shoulder. The boy was smaller than a bag of wheat from the market, which caused the need of protecting the vulnerable being to surge within the parents. Tiny toes peeked from his black blanket, dangling in the air. The witch watched the father and son as distasteful bowels slowly piled in her mouth. As much as seeing them caused doubts to circle her mind, it also caused that hatred from earlier to resurface. She reminded herself that this final task must be done so the cycle continues, and the church can be tormented for their wrongdoings for some additional centuries. She reminded herself that William Stevenson, of all people, was cruelly snatching a son from her loving arms. "Do remember, William Stevenson," she said, masking her contorted face that was raked with anger. "Traditionally, you were supposed to have a 100-year gap before your first pagan gifting. I have adjusted the curse back then for your sake since you are the first to inherit this curse. Your son has been birthed on this day, so in 100 years' time, he shall inherit my powers and repeat your deeds. He shall go on for another 100 years, and if he is to be successful as you, he shall be gifted with a son. Henceforth the cycle continues." "Yes, yes," he said, fawning over his son. He cupped the newborn's tiny face with his soft palm, admiring his adorable air. The baby's arms were aloft as if it dreamed of cuddling the mother who stood close by. But of course, William Stevenson could not sense that. He slid his pinky into his open hand and watched as they curled around it, happiness swirling around the father and son. How unfair. How cruelly unfair. Yet, the world had been unfair to her, so why should she be fair to the world? The witch came to the inner conclusion that if given the chance, she would do it all over again. She would do it again and again until the men who had wronged her could finally see her joyous grin, hidden between the scarlet flames that sprouted from her palms. "I am unsure whether or not I forgot to mention, but since you are a special case, there is a situation," the witch said, to which William Stevenson ignored. Dismissal. That was a very bad thing for him to do. Very bad indeed. "My son. My heir. I am eager to teach you everything you need to know about being a king," he exclaimed, raising the baby to the church ceiling, as the heavens shone their light unto the prodigal son. "The situation is that since your son has been born today, there is no need for you, William Stevenson," the witch blatantly interjected. "You have completed your 2 yearly tasks, and now it is your son's turn to repeat the same thing in 100 years' time." This caught his attention. William Stevenson turned to look at her with a baffled expression, as he lowered the drooling baby. What? Was all he could muster. There was a hesitation in his actions and no more blatant dismissal. I can only split my powers to one Stevenson at a time. You are waste now, William Stevenson. It is your son who is the prodigy, not you anymore, she said, biting the insides of her cheek to stop from shouting with impish glee. Finally it was happening. I do not understand. William Stevenson stammered quietly. Why, you never mentioned this, he said, inhaling shaky breaths. His previously ruddy face turned white as chalk, and no mirth lit his eyes. His eyes and mouth were frozen wide open in an expression of stunned surprise at her ominous words. His hands began to tremor as the witch shot him a menacing smirk as if she knew something he didn't. Which she did. I did. In my Latin chants, she said with a malicious glint in her violet eyes. I am a waste. What does that mean? William Stevenson asked after gulping. His back still cowered with fear, but he mustered the strength to speak with composure. That means your death day is today, William Stevenson. You have lived long enough, she replied nonchalantly. There was a moment of suspended silence before the begging. Even the baby boy quieted before his father began wailing. The witch simply stared at the family she destroyed, as no emotions ran through her. This was her duty after all as a witch. She had accepted this for centuries. Death. But I thought I was immortal. William Stevenson screamed with disbelief, his jade eyes glazed with tears. The witch did not have to waste her time explaining it to William Stevenson. He knew there was no swaying the devil. He knew there was no hope left for him. William Stevenson dropped to his knees as the baby in his arms kicked his legs against the air carelessly. I understand that I have lived long. So be it. Kill me. But I beg you, my lady, allow me a day with my son. I have only recently met him. He is my heir. One day, my lady. One day. Do not take a father away from his son, my lady. God will not forgive it. He screamed in between sobs. The witch simply glowered down at William Stevenson, with nothing but a deadpan face. God shall not forgive you either, William Stevenson, for striking a deal with the devil. William Stevenson wailed as if the ferocity of it would change the course of his timely fate. One day, my lady. Then you shall kill me and do whatever you please with my corpse. One day with my son. My heir. My prodigal boy. He exploded and waterfalls of tears flooded down his cheeks. Please, my lady. I am aware that I vowed to abide by this curse for the remainder of my timely life, but I did not think it would end like this. The hysterical crying and panic that shook from his core terrified the baby and damaged his vulnerable eardrums. The baby began wailing alongside his trembling father, and the witch sighed, having no choice but to end her precious boy's agony now. With God as their witness, she flicked her wrist after whispering to the devil. A choked cry escaped William Stevenson's throat before he instantly collapsed to the floor. His cries sputtered and his eyelids drooped, while the rest of his limbs shuddered intensely. This caused the golden crown that was perched on his head to slide off and clutter against the varnished floor, shattering into a million pieces. Thereafter, his paling body disintegrated. It was what happened when people cursed by the devil die. The particles of his being slowly evaporated, and only the words, my lady, escaped his dying mouth. The witch waved her right palm and the baby hovered in the air at her command, halting his looming drop to the floor. Only King William Stevenson I's clothes remained on the church floor. And a black rose. The witch bent down to pick up her cursed baby and soothed him by rocking him in her arms. She sang William Stevenson to a melody that her mother hummed to her centuries ago. Ravens or crows? Only I, the pagan witch, knows.